Our head of engineering spent more money on 4 consultants in 7 weeks than my whole team costs in a year. And then he stood in a room with the doors open and the whole floor watching through the glass and said he had absolutely no idea anybody was planning to touch anything that weekend. I want to be honest before I get into it. I like the man. That is the part that still sits wrong with me, months later, when I am brushing my teeth, and it comes back for no reason at all. I work for a company that sells scheduling software to dental practices. Not the exciting kind of software. The kind where a woman named Deb in Ottumwa opens her computer at 10 to 7 in the morning and sees who is coming in for a cleaning and which chair they are going in, and whether the hygienist has a gap at 11 she can fill with a walk-in. About 4,000 practices ran on us at the time. Nobody at a party has ever asked me a follow-up question about my job, which is fine, because I have not been to a party in 3 years. Here is my situation, so the rest makes sense. My divorce finalized in the spring. Karina and I were about as civilized as two people can be about a thing like that, which mostly meant we were polite while our lawyers ate the good parts. The settlement said I owed her $41,500 to buy out her half of the house, and it said the 15th of October, and the lawyer explained in that flat voice they use that a fixed date in a settlement is a fixed date, and if I missed it the house went on the market and got split. My daughter Junie is 9. She has one friend she actually loves, a girl who lives 4 doors down, and she has a crooked tree in the backyard that she has fallen out of twice. I was not going to be the guy who took that away over money. I had the money coming. I had been told, in writing, that my promotion to principal engineer was approved and would land in the September cycle, and that it came with a retention payment that would have covered the settlement with about $600 left over. 11 years at the company. The oldest part of our product had my fingerprints all over it. I had already told Karina's lawyer the date was fine. The man who controlled that promotion was Grant Sturdivant, our head of engineering, hired 14 months earlier from a company that made software for veterinary clinics. In my own head, I called him the renovator, because he had never once looked at a thing that already worked and left it alone. He had a habit when he was pleased with himself of rotating his watch band all the way around his wrist with one finger, slow, like he was winding something. He wore very good shoes. And before you decide about him, know this. When Marisol's dad died in February and she was crying in the stairwell because the flights were $900, Grant booked her a ticket that afternoon and paid for it out of his own pocket and never told anybody. She told me. He never brought it up. Not once. Not even later when bringing it up would have helped him. The trouble was the old scheduler. 12 years old, written mostly by a man named Benny Kwiatkowski who is 61 and has a mustache from a different decade and eats the same sandwich every day. The thing is ugly. It is genuinely ugly. It does about 9 things that make no sense until you learn why, and every single one of those 9 things is there because a dentist somewhere did something insane in 2015 and Benny had to catch it. It also has not lost a patient appointment in 4 years. Ugly and correct is a real category, and Benny lived in it. Grant hated it the way some people hate a wallpaper pattern. He would say the word old the way other people say a swear. So in August, he brought in Braswell Partners for consultants, led by a guy named Damon who wore a quarter zip in a building where the air conditioning did not work. Grant announced it in the big conference room on a Tuesday with everybody crammed in, the late ones standing against the wall, and he had slides, and the slides had a lot of arrows on them. He said Braswell had retired systems like ours 14 times. He said the phrase, 1 quarter, clean exit 3 separate times, and I remember counting, which tells you where my head already was. Somebody asked what it cost. Grant did the thing with his watch band, went all the way around, and said the number like it was a good number. $4,800 per consultant per day. 4 of them. I did the arithmetic on the back of my hand and felt my ears get hot, because that is roughly 10 times what any of us cost the company for the same day, and I said so out loud. I said, Grant, that is 10 times what Benny costs, and Benny is the only person alive who knows why this thing does what it does. He smiled at me. He had a good smile. That was the other thing. He said, Wes, you are pricing labor. I am pricing risk. I said I did not know what that meant. I said it in a tone. Marisol, who tests our software and who has the most expressive face of any human being I have ever met, looked at the ceiling and let her whole head roll with it. Tasha, who runs support and therefore knows exactly what happens to real people when we break something, had her arms folded so tight her shoulders were up by her ears. And Benny just sat there with his hands flat on the table, saying nothing, because Benny is not a talker, he is a fixer, and he had already gone somewhere else in his mind. I pushed. I know I pushed. I said, fine, if we are spending that, then buy Benny's time properly. Put him in the room with them full time for 6 weeks. Take him off everything else. Pay him overtime. Pay him double. I do not care. He is still a bargain compared to these guys. Grant said, and I can still hear the exact cadence, that Benny would be available in the shared channel for questions. Available in the shared channel for questions. 61 years old, 12 years of his working life inside that system, and he was going to be a help desk. I had my hand flat on the table, and I noticed halfway through that I was pressing down hard enough that my fingertips had gone white, and I made myself lift it and put it in my lap like a person at a nice dinner. I said the thing I should have said differently. I said, you are going to pay 4 strangers 10 times our rate to learn in 7 weeks what one guy in this room already knows, and then you are going to bill the company for their education. The room got that specific kind of quiet where you can hear the air handler. Damon, sitting up front with his hands laced, made a small pleasant face like he had been complimented in a language he did not speak. Grant looked at me for a long 2 seconds and then said, in a voice that was somehow warmer than before, that he needed me to be a team player on this one. He said he understood I had a lot going on personally. He said it kindly. It was the single most humiliating sentence anybody has said to me at work, and he did not even raise his voice to do it. Colby, who had started 3 weeks earlier and did not know anything yet, leaned over as we filed out and asked me in complete sincerity whether that had gone well. The group chat, the one that does not have any managers in it, went off before I got back to my desk. Marisol had typed one line, all lowercase. He priced risk, Wes. Tasha sent a picture of her own monitor showing our support queue from the last big change, 31 tickets deep, without comment. Somebody posted the number 4,800 over and over until the app collapsed it. Benny, who is in that chat and has never once posted in it, posted a thumbs up, and honestly that made me sadder than anything. Tasha pulled me aside by the printers that afternoon and told me to stop. She said it plain. She said, Wes, you have got something you need out of this place before October, and he holds the pen on it, so stop. I said somebody has to say it. She said somebody did say it, and now everybody knows who he is going to remember. She was not wrong. 2 days later my promotion moved to the January cycle. Grant told me himself, in a one-on-one, with real regret on his face, and he explained that with the size of the outside spend the finance team was tightening everything, and that January was only a few months out. Only a few months out. I said the date out loud, the 15th of October, and I watched him not understand it. And I did not explain, because what was I going to do? Put my divorce paperwork on his desk. Yvette from Accounts Payable emailed the entire company that same week about receipts. She does this. She is relentless in a way I have come to appreciate. She had chased me for 4 days over a $31 keyboard because I had photographed the receipt at an angle, and when I finally walked it down to her, she showed me the binder, an actual physical binder, where she prints every purchase order and every change to it and files it by vendor, because the company got audited in 2019 before my time, and she said never again. I remember laughing about it. I remember saying something about the last honest woman in the building. She said, hand to God, that the paper does not argue with you. Anyway, Braswell got going. Benny wrote them a document. Nobody asked him to. 41 pages, in his flat little style, about the 9 things that make no sense. There is a whole section about recall reminders, which is the thing where the software texts a patient 6 months later to say it is time for your cleaning, because that is where the practices actually make their living. Recall reminders are the beating heart of a dental office, and they are also the single fussiest thing in our product, because of time zones, and because of how practices handle families, and because of a decision Benny made in 2016 that he is not proud of. He explained all of it. He sent it to Damon. Damon replied with a thumbs up, which by then I had started to consider a kind of insult. Here is the part where I have to be fair. For 5 weeks, it went fine. Better than fine. The first phase moved the smallest, dullest part of the system, and it moved cleanly on a Sunday night, and nobody noticed on Monday, which is the highest compliment our industry has. Damon presented the results at the all-hands and used the word surgical, and people clapped. The second phase went the same way. Support tickets actually went down, because one of the consultants found something Benny had always meant to clean up and never had time for, and fixed it in an afternoon. Grant did his lap. Of course he did. He stood up at the all-hands in front of everybody with the good coffee they only bring out on all-hands day, and he said that this was what happens when you stop being sentimental about your own history. And then he did something I did not expect. He said my name. He said that Wes had pushed back hard in August, and that pushback was how you find out if a plan is real, and that he wanted people to keep doing it. He looked right at me when he said it. People turned around in their chairs, and a couple of them nodded at me. And I sat there, and I felt the thing start to loosen in my chest, and I hated that it did. He caught me by the elevators the next week and asked how Junie was doing with the school year. Not, how is your daughter? Her name. He remembered her name from a conversation 8 months earlier at a barbecue where she had spent 40 minutes explaining a video game to him, and he had let her. He asked if the custody schedule was settling down. He said the January cycle was locked in, and he had already put it in writing with the finance team. And I stood there with the elevator door bumping against my shoulder thinking, maybe I am the problem. Maybe I have been the guy in the corner grumbling about the old wallpaper because I hung it. I went home that Friday and told Junie we were staying in the house either way, and I believed it when I said it. The third phase was the appointment book itself. The whole thing. Every practice, every chair, every recurring visit, every recall reminder in the queue. Benny worked Friday from 6 in the morning to 11 at night, getting the old system ready to hand over. Then he came back at 4 on Saturday morning, because Braswell needed somebody on site with the keys and the authority to say yes. And he stayed through the entire cutover. And by the time he got in his truck on Sunday morning, he had been awake for something like 22 hours straight. He drove home. He ate something. He slept. Nobody replaced him for the Sunday. Tasha called me at 6:12 on Monday morning. I was in the kitchen, in socks, and I knew from the fact that it was her voice and not the automatic alert system that it was already past bad. She said, very calmly, because she is always calm, and that is somehow worse. Wes, are you awake? The phones are already going, and it is not even 7 in Iowa. What had happened, in the language a normal person would use, was that Monday morning had arrived at 4,000 dental practices, and the appointment book was wrong. Not blank, which would have been cleaner. Wrong. Some practices opened their computers and saw a Monday from 3 months ago. Some saw a Monday belonging to a completely different practice, which is its own separate nightmare that I did not want to think about for legal reasons. And overnight, at around 2 in the morning, the recall reminders had gone out. All of them. Not the ones due this month. All of them. Something in the way the dates got carried over had convinced the system that every patient in the country was overdue right this second, and it had texted them so. 900,000 people got a message telling them their dentist wanted to see them today. By 7:15, waiting rooms were filling with people who had cleared their morning and driven over. Tasha put her phone on speaker and held it up in the middle of our floor so we could hear the whole music stacked up behind it. And then she put a call through, and a woman in Green Bay who sounded about 50 said, in a voice pitched high and thin, that she had 19 people in her lobby, that she did not know who any of them were, that her hygienist was standing there with nothing to do. And could somebody please just tell her who is supposed to be in chair 2 right now? Nobody could tell her who was supposed to be in chair 2. I got to the office at 6:40, and there were 4 people in. By 7:30, there were maybe 20, coats still on, standing, nobody sitting down, which is a thing I had never seen. Somebody wheeled a whiteboard out of a meeting room, and it stayed blank for the first hour because none of us knew what to write on it. Colby, 3 weeks in, kept asking who was in charge and getting no answer, and then eventually stopped asking and just stood at the end of a desk with his laptop open on his forearm like a waiter. We tried the obvious thing first. Restore from the overnight backup. Except the overnight backup was taken after the cutover, so it was a perfect, pristine copy of the wrong thing. We tried the second obvious thing. Turn the old scheduler back on. Benny's ugly, correct, 12-year-old thing, still sitting there. It came up. For about 90 seconds we were heroes. And then Marisol, watching a test practice, said in a completely level voice that she was looking at July. The consultants had switched off the piece that kept the old system fed, weeks ago, quietly, as a cleanup task, and so the old system had been sitting there dreaming of summer. We showed practices of July that had already happened. Tasha's queue doubled in 11 minutes. We turned it back off. Damon joined from a hotel room in another state at 8:40, on video, with a lamp behind his head, and he was calm, and he was articulate, and he walked one of our people through a correction, and 8 minutes later, every single appointment in the system existed twice. 2 patients per chair, every practice, all day. Marisol made a sound I have never heard a person make. Somebody in the back said we should stop taking suggestions from the hotel, and nobody laughed, and Damon's audio cut out at exactly that moment, which everybody chose to believe was a coincidence. At 9:10, I said the thing everybody had been avoiding, which was that we needed Benny. Benny's phone was off. Benny lives out past the grain elevators, 40 minutes, on a road with no name that anybody uses. Benny is 61 and does not have a home phone anymore, and does not have a wife to answer it, and had been awake for 22 hours 2 days earlier. He was, we would learn, so deeply asleep that his neighbor's dog going off at the strange car in the drive did not wake him. I called 11 times. Tasha called. Colby, God bless him, sent an email. Marisol got her keys and left without asking anybody. The rest of us kept trying things. We wrote a list of every practice with more than 30 appointments and started calling them one at a time to tell them we did not know yet, which is the worst call to make, and Tasha made 40 of them herself without ever once raising her voice. Somebody found that the printed daily sheets from Friday were still sitting in the practice's own print queues, and for about an hour we had 6 people on the phone walking receptionists through printing yesterday's yesterday, which helped maybe 200 offices out of 4,000. Colby tried a fix on the support side and froze the tool Tasha's whole team was using to see tickets, and he went white, and I told him it was fine and to go get water, and he went to the stairwell instead, and I heard him in there, and I let him have it. Grant arrived at 9:50. He had been at a breakfast thing. He came through the doors in a jacket, saw the floor, saw the standing, saw the whiteboard, and the color went out of his face in real time. I watched it happen. He asked me what he could do, and I could not think of a single thing to give him. And that is not a small thing to realize about your boss at 10 in the morning. Marisol got to Benny's house at 10 past 10 and banged on the door for 6 minutes. She told me later she had started to be genuinely afraid he was dead. He opened it in a t-shirt with his hair standing straight up on one side. And she said his first words, before hello, before anything, were, "It's the reminders, isn't it?" He got here at 11. He came in through the side door in Saturday's shirt, and the whole floor went quiet in a wave as people noticed him, and he did not say anything to anybody. He sat down at a machine that was not his, asked one question, listened to the answer, and started working. Grant went over and started to say something, and Benny put his hand up, not rudely, just up, and Grant stopped and stood behind him for a minute and then walked away. It took Benny until 11:40 that night to make the appointment book true again, and until Tuesday afternoon to sort out the reminders. And that entire time, the only thing he said that I would call an opinion was somewhere around 6 in the evening when he took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes and said, to nobody, that the document had a whole section about this. Wednesday morning, Diane called the room. Diane is our chief executive. She is not loud. She has a way of sitting extremely still that makes everybody else fidget. The big conference room, the one with the glass wall onto the floor, and she did not close the blinds, and I do not think that was an accident. Grant, me, Tasha, Marisol, Benny, Colby, who probably should not have been there, and Yvette from accounts payable, sitting at the end with her binder, who Diane had asked in because the Braswell invoice had come in $206,000 over the number she had approved. Diane said, "What happened?" Grant talked for 4 minutes. He was good. That is the thing nobody tells you about people like him. They are genuinely good at it. He said Braswell had gone beyond the agreed plan. He said the scope had drifted. He used the phrase, "We trusted the specialists," twice, and he said that in hindsight the oversight model was too light, and he took responsibility for the oversight model, which is a way of saying you take responsibility for a thing that is not a thing. Diane said, "Explain the weekend to me." And Grant said he could not, entirely. He said the schedule had been discussed at the team level. He said he had never authorized a move over a weekend, that he would never sign off on something that size going out on a Saturday, and that if he had known it was happening on the 3rd, he would have stopped it, full stop. He said, and his hand went to his watch band and went all the way around, that the deeper problem was that our only real expert had been unreachable for a critical 5 hours, and that this was a resourcing gap he had flagged for months. Benny did not move. Tasha's jaw went so tight I could see it from across the table. Diane said, "Unreachable." Grant said yes. He said he had asked repeatedly for coverage on that system and been told there was no budget for standby. He said, if there is one thing I would change, it is that I would have had a specialist on standby that whole weekend, at any price. And Yvette, at the end of the table, who had not spoken once, opened her binder and turned it around and slid it up the table with 2 fingers, and she read from it in the same flat, patient voice she uses when she is asking you to photograph a receipt straight on. Change order 1. Optional line item, legacy specialist standby, 16 hours, $6,400. Declined. Change order 2. Accelerated weekend cutover, for consultants, Saturday the 3rd through Sunday the 4th, billed at 10 times standard day rate, $192,000. Approved electronically, Thursday the 1st, 11:47 at night. Then she read out whose name was on the approval, and she said the name the way you would read out a street address. Nobody said anything for a while. Grant's hand went back to his watch band and stopped there, halfway around, and stayed. When he started to say Yvette's name, his voice came apart on the first syllable, and he had to stop and start again, and he did not get any further than that. Diane let it sit. Then she asked Benny, directly, what he had told the consultants about the reminders. Benny said, 41 pages, section 4. Diane asked if she could have a copy, and Benny said he would print it, and I swear that is the only moment in the whole week where the man looked pleased. Then Diane stood up and said, Grant, you and I are going to my office now, and I am going to call Braswell myself this afternoon. That was all. No speech. He walked out ahead of her past the glass wall with the entire floor watching, and one of the newer support people actually stood up to see, and Marisol looked down at the table with her lips pressed flat and did not enjoy it as much as she thought she was going to. He was gone by Friday. The chat about it was, I would say, mixed. 2 people brought up the plane ticket in February. Marisol was one of them. Diane kept me back after and asked me one question, which was what I would need, and I told her, and she said all right. My promotion went through effective the 1st of September, backdated, with the retention payment attached, and she signed it in the room. I did not explain the date to her. She never asked. The transfer to Karina's lawyer cleared on the 9th of October, 6 days early, and I sat in the car outside Junie's school and looked at the confirmation on my phone for longer than a grown man should. That night, Junie asked, in the specific, careful voice she uses when she has been saving a question up, whether we were keeping the tree. I said yeah. She said good, because she had left something in it.